Evelyn and Sarah returned to Evelyn's apartment, their minds racing with the implications of their recent encounter. The protective amulet had offered some measure of safety, but they knew it wouldn't be enough to banish the vengeful spirit from Blackwood Manor. They needed more information, and more importantly, they needed help. Sarah suggested they consult a local historian who specialized in the occult history of the town. His name was Professor Adrian Whitlock, an eccentric but knowledgeable figure who had published several papers on supernatural phenomena in the region. Despite his reputation for being somewhat reclusive, Evelyn and Sarah decided to pay him a visit. The professor's house was a large, old Victorian on the edge of town, surrounded by overgrown gardens and tall, rusting iron gates. They knocked on the heavy wooden door, and after a few moments, it creaked open to reveal a tall, thin man with piercing blue eyes and a shock of white hair. "Professor Whitlock?" Evelyn asked tentatively. "Yes," he replied, studying them intently. "What brings you here?" "We need your help," Sarah said. "It's about Blackwood Manor." At the mention of the mansion, Whitlock's expression hardened. He stepped aside, allowing them to enter. The interior of the house was cluttered with books, strange artifacts, and old furniture. He led them to a dimly lit study where they explained their experiences and showed him the journal and amulet. Whitlock listened carefully, his face growing more serious with each detail. When they finished, he sat back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "You are dealing with a powerful and malevolent entity," he said. "Dr. Marsh was a fool to dabble in such dark arts. The spirit he bound to the mansion is not just any ghost, it is a revenant, a spirit driven by intense hatred and a thirst for vengeance. Is there any way to stop it?" Evelyn asked, her voice wavering. Whitlock nodded slowly. "There are ways, but it will not be easy. You will need to perform a ritual to sever the spirit's ties to the mansion and banish it permanently. This will require certain items and precise incantations. Additionally, you must locate the object to which the spirit is bound and destroy it." He stood and began searching through his shelves, pulling out old books and dusty scrolls. "You will need salt, iron, and blessed candles to create a protective circle. The incantations must be spoken in Latin, and you will need to focus a personal item of the spirit when it was alive to strengthen the ritual." Evelyn and Sarah exchanged glances, their resolve hardening. They were in deep now, but they were committed to seeing this through. Whitlock handed them a list of the necessary items and a copy of the incantations. "There is one more thing," Whitlock said, his tone grave. "The ritual must be performed at midnight, the hour when the barrier between the living and the dead is weakest. You must not leave the circle until the ritual is complete, no matter what happens." They thanked him and left, their minds racing with the magnitude of the task ahead. Over the next few days, they gathered the necessary items, visiting antique shops, occult stores, and even the local church for the blessed candles. Whitlock had given them an old iron dagger, which they hoped would be sufficient for destroying the bound object. The night of the ritual arrived. Evelyn and Sarah made their way to Blackwood Manor, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and determination. They set up in the basement, arranging the salt, iron, and candles in a protective circle around the table where the journal and amulet lay. The oppressive presence in the house was stronger than ever, the whispers echoing faintly in the background. They began the ritual at midnight, chanting the Latin incantations in unison. The air grew colder, and the whispers turned into guttural growls. The candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Evelyn and Sarah held their ground, their voices steady despite the fear gnawing at their insides. As they chanted, a dark, shadowy figure materialized in the center of the circle. It was the spirit, its form shifting and writhing, its eyes glowing with malevolence. It lunged at them, but the protective circle held, the salt and iron forming a barrier it could not cross. The spirit howled in rage, its voice echoing through the room. Evelyn and Sarah continued the incantations, their voices growing louder, more confident. The figure recoiled, its form dissipating slightly as the power of the ritual took hold. Finally, the incantations reached their climax. Evelyn picked up the iron dagger, ready to destroy the bound object. But as she did, the spirit surged forward, a burst of dark energy knocking her off her feet. The protective circle wavered, the candles flickering dangerously. "Evelyn, now!" Sarah shouted, struggling to keep her balance. Evelyn scrambled to her feet, the dagger clutched tightly in her hand. She raised it high and brought it down on the amulet, shattering it into pieces. The spirit let out a blood-curdling scream, its form dissolving into a cloud of black smoke. The oppressive presence lifted, the whispers fading into silence. The candles flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. For a moment, there was only the sound of their heavy breathing. Then, slowly, the lantern came back to life, its light revealing the basement now empty and still. Evelyn and Sarah looked at each other, relief washing over them. They had done it. The spirit was gone, its hold on the mansion broken. They gathered their things and left the mansion, stepping into the cool night air. The stars shone brightly above, a stark contrast to the darkness they had just faced. As they walked away from Blackwood Manor, Evelyn felt a sense of closure. The mansion's secrets had been uncovered, its curse lifted. But she also knew that the experience had changed her, leaving her with a deeper understanding of the unknown and a newfound respect for the power of the supernatural. They returned to Professor Whitlock's house to thank him for his guidance. He greeted them with a knowing smile, relieved to see them safe and sound. Over tea, they recounted their harrowing experience, the professor nodding thoughtfully. "You have done a great service, not just for yourselves but for the town," he said. "Blackwood Manor will now be at peace, thanks to your bravery." Evelyn and Sarah left his house feeling a sense of accomplishment. The storm had passed, and they could finally move on. As they drove away, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, promising a new beginning and a future free from the shadows of the past.